A disruption of the polar vortex is expected, and this will likely bring cold Arctic air with increased winter weather chances as we move into the month of December. Here to provide you all the details that we have on this as of right now. My name's Mitch. Good Thursday morning. Hope you guys are doing well. Subscribe if you haven't, like the video if you like it, and if anybody has anything I can pray about or pray over, please drop it in the comments below. Let's get rocking and rolling this morning. So let's start this off with a graphic everybody loves to see, and that's the snowfall graphics. This does extend pretty far out, 46 days, a little bit past Christmas Day. Please don't view this as a forecast, more so a signal that's backed up with what we're about to discuss deeper into this video. And as you can tell, that snow line drops pretty far south. That does not mean that you're guaranteed snow all the way down to Dallas or Little Rock, Nashville, Charlotte between now and just past Christmas Day. Just view this as a signal. Now, let's work west to east, and we take a closer look at the western U.S. I can say with some pretty decent confidence, and this goes out 32 days, so all the way out to about the December 13th time frame, that we're going to get a lot of snow out west, depending on your elevation, of course. Everything is elevation driven out here, but I do think the ski resorts, things like that, Cascades, Sierra Nevada, the Rockies, are definitely going to score in the upcoming shorter term pattern that we are about to get. So we extend this past 32 days, go all the way to 46 days out, just past Christmas, and you can see there's a lot of snow on the way. What about these lower elevations? Maybe like, Denver, Boulder, some of the valley areas, not necessarily lower elevation, but lower compared to the higher mountain ranges you're surrounded by. I think even, you folks could certainly see a lot of snow, just depending on how things set up. Now we scoot over to the central portion of the country. This goes all the way out to the 13th. I mean, you can see there's a decent signal all the way through mid-December, all the way down to Kansas. I mean, the panhandle of Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, even down into, Missouri, the Midwest, things like that, of course. I do think it's going to get more active over the next few weeks up here in the northern plains and the upper Midwest, things like that. But we extend this just past Christmas Day, and, it drops a little bit more. So a little bit of a signal all the way down to North Texas, deeper in Oklahoma, Arkansas, things like that. Now we take it to the eastern U.S. between now and, around the 13th, mid-December time frame. Little bit of a signal that scoots down to the southern Alps into the mid-south, but most of the snow certainly up here in the Great Lakes region, interior New England. Little bit of a signal down the I-95 corridor into the mid-Atlantic, but you extend this just past Christmas Day, and you can see that snow line drops a little bit more. So what backs this up? Right, so let's start to dive into that. So, the blue area you see on your screen, this is lower pressure troughing. Typically, you get some type of storm system associated with this, or multiple storm systems. It's quite literally low pressure, which is storminess, right? And then cold air to follow. So we start this off with a Monday morning of Thanksgiving week, so the 24th. So you see this big blob of blue over areas of southwestern Canada, southern Canada, and areas of the western U.S. As a trough, it's likely going to dive down into the western U.S. You can see some ridging and the yellowish orange red color. You're normally going to get warmer than average temperatures in this with this and quieter conditions. And as we continue to scoot deeper into Thanksgiving week, the 25th, getting into the 26th time frame, trough I think is going to dive down into the western U.S. Does it really anchor in? I think in the short term it does, but this is speaking a little bit past what's right out in front of us, and then we're going to actually speak a little bit of things that are a little bit closer to us with the active storm track upcoming. But as we start to move into, say, Thanksgiving Day, that's what this is, you can see some whitening in the middle of the country. That means we have some lowering of pressure, and I do think this trough could shift into the middle of the country. Backing up what I'm about to get into, if we actually connect the dots here, which is the end of the Euro ensemble with the beginning of the Euro extended, so the Euro weeklies, there's a little bit of a difference. The Euro weeklies wants to keep this trough a little bit further out west. So there isn't a clean connection here. Euro ensemble starts to move more so ridging into the western U.S., starts to drop more so a trough in the middle of the country. If you look at the weeklies here, it continues to kind of keep that trough. The area in blue you see storminess, cooler weather in the western U.S. But we move this in time, and this is what fascinates me. As we get into the last day or two of November, first couple days of December, we see this huge countrywide trough that sets up. And you see this big blue over a good chunk of the lower 48, southern areas of Canada. This to me screams a dislodgement of cold air with an active storm track over a good chunk of the country. So when I see this, I see a lot of cold air dumping down. You got a little bit of a spiking of a ridge up into Alaska, symbolizing a negative EPO. Can we get a spiking of the ridge in the western U.S.? This would create a more active, stormy, wintry pattern, colder pattern for the eastern U.S. I'm not sure. We got to figure that out. A little bit of a spiking of the ridge, but this trough continues to really just dive deep down into the lower 48. And, as we start to get a little bit deeper into December, this is getting into the 8th, into the 9th, you see that trough begin to position itself a little bit more into the central to eastern U.S. But how much does it dig? Not sure. We figure that out as we get closer, but we get through the first 10 days of December, and it looks like we have a little bit of what we call a positive PNA, a ridge in the west that gets going. And right as we get into maybe the middle portion of December, we kind of introduce that day 10 to day 20 in December 10th through the 20th. Maybe we introduce a better pattern for the eastern U.S. But we just got to continue to figure this one out. So as far as temperatures, and this is at 850 millibars in Celsius. So what I want you to view this are we having a cooler atmosphere or a warmer atmosphere? So the blues and the greens you see on your screen, that's a colder atmosphere. And the kind of the lower levels above our head, about a mile above our head. But it's telling us that the atmosphere is getting cooler. You see these orange, things like that, these warmer colors. It's a warmer atmosphere. And this backs up well what we're seeing with the upper pattern in general. So as we're starting to get into kind of the middle portion of Thanksgiving week, we're getting into Thanksgiving at this point. In fact, this is actually Thanksgiving Day. What you're seeing here, big blob of blue and green kind of oozing down into the northern Rockies and the plains. To me, this screams some sort of battleground with temperatures as the pattern is transitioning. So I wouldn't be surprised around Thanksgiving, day or two before, day or two after, give or take a day, we have some sort of Arctic boundary with an active storm track right in the middle of the country. This could bring some active weather around Thanksgiving Day. I think it's very possible here. And as we continue to move this in time, we can't go any further. This is the end of the Euro Ensemble. So once again, temperature-wise, we have to kind of go back to the Euro Weeklies and start off with the Euro Ensemble leaves us warmer atmosphere in the eastern U.S., colder atmosphere in the central to western U.S. So does this switch up? And it does. As we start to get to the last day of November, keep wanting to say the last day of Thanksgiving. That's not a month. It's a holiday. Last day of November into the first day of December, you can see the cold air begin to ooze eastward pretty well. And I'm telling you, there's going to be, where does the cold air drop initially? I really think it's going to drop into the western to central U.S. initially, but I think that changes as we get deeper into December, several days or so. But it really shows what I think is going to be an Arctic air mass that drops down to the lower 48, sometime to the first few days of December, some sort of boundary. And as we move forward in time, this is getting into the 8th, the 9th of December, that cold air could transition into the eastern U.S. And we could have a spiking a bit of the ridge into the western U.S., warming everybody on up. Now, once again, this isn't the upper levels, but it tells us what our atmosphere is. So is it cold? Is it warm? Things like that. So what I just explained really is backed up pretty well. And I will say this was issued about 6 days ago. I'm very excited to see what the new one says. This will be issued tomorrow. The 3 to 4 week, temperature outlook. And this runs from the 22nd through the 5th, kind of that transition period. Thanksgiving week into the first few or several days of December. And it really backs this up well. If we kind of take this, and in fact, let's look at the 7-day kind of look here. And let's back this up right here. Okay, this is between the 27th through the 4th of December. Okay, and I know it says 28-5, but this is the evening of the 27th and then the evening of the 4th. And you can see most of the cold air exactly where this is showing. A little bit of a difference here, but I think it's doing well, especially the fact that they made this 6 days ago. So what is the next 3 to 4 week temperature outlook going to show, which is going to extend this a little bit further into December? But it is showing still warmer than average temperatures for the southern tier of the country. That makes sense. You're seeing that. And then you're seeing some below average temperatures for the Northeast. Makes sense here. So this graphic in the blue, that's where they're leaning for below average. They're leaning towards a chance of below average temperatures in the blue areas, and in the orange areas, they're leaning towards chances at above average temperatures in these areas. So, you know, as far as any kind of active storm pattern, you know, the only thing we can really do, and I'm going to talk about the time frame leading up to what we just discussed, but kind of looking at the tail end of this that connects the pattern we're trying to figure out. Is there any storm systems? And remember, I discussed, I think there's going to be some sort of battleground in the middle of the country as we get into Thanksgiving week. I think Thanksgiving week has an opportunity to be pretty active. But this is getting into the 25th and to the 26th. It shows some sort of storm system. You got snow where it typically snows in late November. Nothing unusual about this. And rain where it normally rains and for the most part in late November. But you can tell there's some sort of battleground of temperature share, low pressure popping off the Rockies, and that kind of moves. And we get way out. I know it's, you know, it's all the way 15 days out, but this is all the way into Thanksgiving night. And shows the cold air dropping down a little bit further south, but shows some sort of battleground storm system temperature-wise. So, you know, and it makes sense. You know, if we go all the way out to the last day of the Euro operational run, which we know is going to change, it backs up everything we just talked about for the last 9 to 10 minutes. All right, temperature battleground here. Okay, well above average temperatures, 10, 20, 25 degrees above average temperature-wise, you know, potentially for Thanksgiving and a day or two before or after. And then there's some sort of battleground of temperatures. And then we got temperatures well below average, 14, 15, 20, 25 degrees below average up here. So there's some sort of cold air oozing in from what I think is going to be a drop of Arctic air. And, you know, that makes sense. When you look at the 20th through the 26th, 8 to 14 day temperature outlook issued yesterday, you know, this takes us into Thanksgiving week, showing for a high chance of above average temperatures across the entire central and especially the eastern U.S., especially the southern tier. So it looks like it's going to be a warm Thanksgiving across areas of the eastern U.S. But looks to be cold, and there's going to be some sort of battleground right in the middle across the western U.S., portions of the western central U.S. Now, a big question with this is what I just mentioned at the very beginning of the video, is the disruption of the polar vortex. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I'm an extreme expert on this. I know the basics, and this is something that I think as a whole, a lot of the weather community is still learning a lot about, especially with forecasting it. But we are now in range of the operational runs of this actually happening, meaning we're seeing it inside 10 to 15 days. And it's working closer to us. So these are temperatures way, way up in the atmosphere, okay? And, you know, we're going to keep this very simple. The areas you see in the orange and kind of the red, kind of the brownish white colors, these are well above average temperatures for this area of the atmosphere, which is way up. And this is the top of the earth right here. This is North America, the lower 48 down here. So as we're getting about a week from today, we're seeing a warming of the Arctic region, a disruption of the polar vortex, which spins around up here. And we call it a sudden stratospheric warming event. You can just say SSW for short. And so when we have a dramatic and rapid increase of temperatures in the Arctic region, this disrupts the flow of the Arctic region, and we can have kind of an unleash of Arctic air on one side of the globe or multiple sides of the globe or the other. And in this case, it looks like it's positioned to drop down into the lower 48. So as we have this warming event up here, we're probably going to have cold Arctic air dropping down into the lower 48. The peak of this event looks to be around Thanksgiving week. You can see, I mean, you know, the whitish, pinkish colors in here. It's well above average temperature-wise in the upper levels of the atmosphere right up here in the Arctic. So this is happening, warming of the Arctic. This is going to dislodge cold Arctic air down into the lower 48 down here, and we just got to see what happens. This is going to be a very interesting event. And, you know, if we look at this, another thing we got to figure out is the MJO. Okay? The cold phase, if you're a winter weather fan, that you want this to get into is 8 right here. phase 8, this is phase 7, phase 6, 5, 4. Okay, right now, if you look really closely here, what is it, the 13th of November? So we're in phase 6 right here, which is pretty much a warm phase for almost the entirety of the country, which, we're pretty much getting warm weather for the entirety of the country, except a couple areas like the Northeast. But we can still get kind of shots of Arctic air like we just got in some of the warmer phases. But for a locked in true winter weather pattern, that if you're a winter weather fan, you got to get this to get through phase 7, which is not a very favorable phase. It works out for some areas like the northern tier of the country. But phase 8, phase 1 are the golden cold winter weather phases, especially for the central to eastern U.S. So, once you see this 29 go to 1, that's us leaving November, getting into December. So the first week of December, we're still in phase 7. But as we get into we kind of introduce the middle part of the month, 8th, 9th, the latest Euro extended gets us into that golden phase, which is phase 8. And once you get into phase 8, the atmosphere is just like bang, it just responds. And you mix that with the fact that we could have a dislodgement of Arctic air. There's a lot of things working in favor for something as we get into December. Now, could we get hung up in phase 7? Absolutely. For example, we're probably going to get hung up in phase 6 as we get into the end of the month, which is why we're going to be so warm across the middle and eastern portion of the country. Phase 7 is I've always considered phase 7 a kind of a transitional MJO phase. Phase 8 is when we start to lock in something different, which is typically a colder, more winter weather pattern. So we just got to watch this, but there is some things pointing to us setting up to really maybe a December to remember across areas of the country if you're a winter weather fan. Now, I know I've seen comments like, man, not everybody's a winter weather fan, blah, blah, blah. Listen, I get that. And I know, everybody's sensitive to certain things, but at the end of the day, guys, I'm a winter weather fan. I'm always going to talk in favor of winter weather. What somebody is very interested in could be considered dangerous for somebody else. And I think that goes with anything in life outside of weather. A lot of people are interested in football, like me. Somebody else that don't give a rip about football might consider the sport and very, very stupid and dangerous because people are hitting one another. So, if you kind of tiptoe through life based on what people like and don't like, what consider dangerous, not, then you ain't going to be able to talk about nothing, right? So enough of that. I got to give you guys a drama spill every once in a while. But listen, the weather leading up to the period we just talked about could be very active. I made a video about it yesterday. I'm probably going to make more videos about it going forward, but we're going to continue to talk about both, right? So we're getting into this weekend. I think we're going to have a storm system over the Northeast that swings through, could introduce some more lake effect snow. We've had some big lake effect snows up here in the Tug Hill Plateau, favorite areas. A little bit of snow from Maine with this. And then sort of a quiet period. We could have some weather entering the western U.S. And I really think as we get about a week from today, a big storm system could move across the middle of the country. It's quite literally a week from today, November the 20th. Shows a 997 cutting across the middle of the country. See all these, this yellow and orange and red. This could mean severe weather. And this cuts across because we have a ridge anchored across the eastern U.S., and there's not really any cold air. This looks very warm. In fact, it brings a total washout, if this is the way it happens, into areas that start to see snow normally as we get into this part of November. But 984 ripping right through the Great Lakes region. That moves in. Then another system shows up 10 days from now. And this could bring some wild weather. And we get that through. And then we start to get closer to that period we just discussed, right? A little bit of cold air starts to ooze back in. And I still think the middle of the country remains active as we get all the way up into Thanksgiving. So if we actually look at the 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook, it backs up what we just discussed. Active storm track, almost the entire lower 48 besides Maine is leaning towards higher chances at above average precipitation. So whether that's snow or rain, in this case, I think most of the central eastern U.S., this is going to mean rain. But, beneficial rain's coming for a lot of people. I know from my location here in South Carolina, it's kind of feast or famine. It's either extremely dry for weeks on end, and then we get like 2 inches of rain in one day. But we even extend this all the way out to the 26th. This is 20th through the 26th. 8 to 14 day precipitation outlook. Most of the country going at a higher than not chance at above average precipitation. So, Yeah, it looks pretty active. And if we look at just precipitation in general, moisture, not really showing snow or rain. This is just precipitation. It shows a highlighted area in the middle of the country into the Ohio Valley areas in the Midwest for a lot of rain right into here. And I'm going to confidently say this is going to be mainly rain. So I do think severe weather can enter the picture. And speaking of severe weather chances, what about those ingredients? If I just look at the operational run, we're going to start next Monday. This is moisture levels, your dew points. Once you get dew points into the 60s, that's certainly high enough dew points, a moist environment to support severe weather, especially this time of the year. And we're definitely well into secondary severe weather season as we start to get into Tuesday. Look at this big plume of moisture on the operational euro showing up across, it seems like an area of the country that always gets severe weather. Arkansas, Western Tennessee, Mississippi, keep climbing up the Mississippi River Valley. And then we get into Wednesday, and this is a solid, broad, moist sector rising all the way up into southern areas of Iowa, well into Illinois, areas of the Midwest. Do we have an overlapping of wind energy with this? I think we will, but trying to fine tune when that best day is for severe weather chances. But I would watch Wednesday and Thursday of next week, and even into Thursday. Once again, big area of moist air, and then it looks like a cold front sort of knocks it down. But a lot of moist air hangs around the weekend before Thanksgiving across the southeast. I mean, that's very warm air. And then once again, as we're getting into like the 23rd, this is past 10 days, another big plume of moist air shoots up. And this is going to happen because we have a lot of low pressure shooting across the middle of the country. This is going to rip up southerly flow, bring a lot of moist air out of the Gulf into areas of the country. And, in response to that moist air, you're going to get higher Cape levels. And these little areas down here, this is Cape levels, and these spike with the spiking of the higher dew points and moist levels here. And here comes another big spiking here. So we got to watch. I think an active pattern setting up. An active snow pattern? No. But I will say the western U.S. is going to get their due. They deserve it. It's been kind of a slow start out here, but I think that the ski resorts are going to get pretty active. It's between now and Monday the 24th. And I do think plentiful snow is on the way. Going to get that snowpack ongoing. Now, talking about today's weather, middle of the country is pretty quiet. Going to have to get this in motion again. We do have just some northwest flow screeching across the northeast, but we've lost a lot of the cold air, but some heavy snow still falling, mainly rain though. Big slug of moisture hitting central and northern California all the way to Oregon, Washington. Moving past this, watches, warnings, and advisories, winter storm warnings, winter weather advisories up to Sierra Nevada, some flood watches up for areas of California, wind alerts for just this big storm system moving in. Everybody else is quiet though. Risk of thunderstorms, watch out across California. Risk of flash flooding. I would certainly watch out in California. We actually have a slight risk, 15% risk in these yellow areas of flash flooding within 25 miles in a given location. So be aware of that. Southeast today, beautiful, quiet weather, warming on up. Cold start this morning, but we warm up quickly across these areas. The Northeast, still some energy, just drifting down from the Northwest. Still locked in kind of that troughing, so you're going to get more cold air, and we're going to get some flakes flying around out here. Some areas will just remain rain, some will be snow, but no heavy moisture by any means. South Central U.S., with a quiet, beautiful day expected. Enjoy it. I don't think it's going to stay quiet for long in this area of the country. North Central U.S., it's quiet also. Enjoy it. Nothing to speak on. Hope you guys are doing awesome. Western U.S., it is pretty active. In northern Central California, a lot of rain getting surged up. And this low pressure off the west coast surges some moisture pretty far south. So getting into tomorrow morning, L.A., down the Southern California coastline, Sierra Nevada starts to pick up that snowfall. It gets a lot more active. And I just think the western U.S. is going to get more active. Temperatures across the eastern half of the country, northeast still locked into very cold temperatures. Southeast warming on up. Definitely warming up across the Great Lakes region. Rapid snow melt is underway. The south central portion of the country is definitely warm. And still warm across the western U.S., but I do think that'll change. That's all I got, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all. Appreciate y'all. Appreciate the support. And we'll continue to try to figure out this pattern. Listen, it's something that could really change up very fast. Things could get very active just like that. I can feel it. And, going forward, I'm going to take some risk on what my confidence level is on things. And, I'm going to be wrong. I'm going to be right with certain things. And, heck, I expect you guys to hold me accountable, but I am going to choose my words wisely. Make sure you guys don't view graphics like, this as a forecast. It's just a signal. But, some people are still going to view it as a forecast, but it's not going to stop me from doing it the way that I do it, right? So just kind of listen to how I'm explaining things. I think some people just want to hear what they want to hear. And listen, I get it. And it's my responsibility as the person who's shown you the information to provide context. But some people just skip right over that, and they don't really want to hear that. So, but anyways, love you guys. Appreciate y'all. Have a wonderful day. We'll do it again tomorrow morning. God bless.